And then we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you, SeMia, for joining me. I'm super excited to have this conversation. We've obviously talked in the past, so I know some of the things you're going to say, but I'm excited for everybody else to hear it. So, all right, we are live everywhere. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So, yep. All right, everybody sees me. Everybody can hear me. All right, perfect. So thank you all for joining. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for joining. I'm excited for this great conversation that we're going to have about climate and environmental justice, things that I don't think are even talked about enough, especially when it comes to the effects of how it is on all of us on our daily lives. So I'm excited to be joined by SeMia Bray, who is a managing principal consultant at Craig Consulting Group Incorporated. If I got that wrong, please correct me. But
you got it right.
Yes. Perfect. She is an expert in this field when it comes to climate and environmental justice. So I wanted to make sure that I had someone that clearly knows more than me about this subject to join me. So we do kind of have a lot to talk about in the next 30 minutes because I'm assuming it's going to be like just a wonderful back and forth. So we'll probably go ahead and get started. But if you have any questions, drop them either in the comments. If you have comments, drop them in the comments, obviously. But the first topic that we'll go ahead and start with is the Energy Jobs and Justice Act. So, SeMia, I want to hear your thoughts on this, on House Bill 429. For those that may not be super familiar, just to give like a very brief overview, a very quick and dirty explanation. This bill would basically launch the state's first, well, maybe not the first, but the largest economic development initiative. And that's going to come with a lot of different benefits that are going to affect us and certainly going to affect our future. So when you think of EJA for short, where does your mind go?
So my mind goes to people and all the shades of humanity. Well, first, let me say, Bria, you know I'm a fan. Thank you so much for honoring me with the opportunity to spend Absolutely. Some time with you today. I think the saying that I heard yesterday, which I will be repeating often, is that as young people, you all move faster. But those of us who are 50 and above, we know where the shortcuts are. So we need one another is what
I like that. I like it.
We need one another. And when we work together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish to the benefit of the people that we serve. Right. And so, thank you for just brightening my day with that sunshine, that youthful energy and sunshine. And so, so Energy Jobs and Justice Act. Mm-hmm. Well, when I think about that, I think about comprehensive legislation that really looks at three main things, looks at equity, right? And we can get a little bit deeper in this if you want to later in our conversation. It also looks at carbon reduction, in a broad way, but things that all of us can participate in. And then the third big bucket that the Energy Jobs and Justice Act really looks at, and this is why I like it, is that it looks at accountability and transparency within the PUCO, the Public Utilities Commission. So, and that's more so in light of the scandal that came around House Bill 6, but not a reaction to that per se. It's more about there are procedures and policies and in our legislation that were designed a long time ago, legacy legislation. Right? A long time ago. And our world has changed, if you hadn't noticed. And so, that's about looking at legislation that is more complementary to how our lives move today.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So we'll probably talk about more of the equity a little bit later, but just kind of like highlighting some of the things. I looked at the bill. Well, let me rewind. I looked at the analysis.
Yes.
Even the analysis had so much information, so many things that, like I said, I'm just shocked that there aren't more supporters of this bill, sponsors down in the State House, but that it's not being talked about on a daily basis. Because one of the things that even our campaign was working and looking into was clean energy jobs and what that looks like. So here in the Valley, we had GM. we had steel, we had Lordstown, we've had those good jobs. People were able to graduate, not go to college, go get a job, and still make above minimum wage and a livable wage. Those jobs don't exist. But we have a lot of things coming down to Lordstown. And if we can start to attach those jobs into like clean energy, into these types of industries, I believe that we would see a boom in the market.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Bria. And the Energy Jobs and Justice Act, by all means, is not a silver bullet to all of the economic ills, but it definitely is a good contributor to positive forward movement, right? Yeah. So in that legislation, you'll see the term just transition communities. That is a term that's used for all of those communities you just described. Communities where they were built or their lifeblood was this industry, whatever it might be, coal, steel, car makers, and that is no longer in those communities. And when that left, not only did that business leave, but all the supply chain businesses connected to it left as well. And so that really leaves a community in a very, very difficult place. And so this legislation, some people say, well, oh, it's just the environmental justice. That's a part of it. It's also the just transitions, because see, it's about humanity and it's about all Ohioans being able to, at this time of plenty, right? When we think about the environmental revolution that is coming and across, solar, wind, we think about EV infrastructure, these things are things that are going to happen only in our lifetime once. Right. There's a lot of work to be done. And there's a lot of good people, like you just described, who could learn how to do that work and could be participants in that. And so part of what the Energy Jobs and Justice Act looks at is these workforce hubs that are not only about workforce training and jobs, but it's also about contractors and business owners, because we understand that any type of new industry needs that supply chain. Right. That supply chain that supports a community. And that's how we begin to transfer what we call environmental justice communities and just transition communities back to the thriving communities that they deserve to be. Yeah.
So what it sounds like you're saying is, and it sounds like there's tech cred, which tech cred helps Ohioans. It's like on the job training. So in a year, you're able to you're on the job, but you're able to get training. And so that it is bolstering our workforce. It is allowing people that are currently in the workforce to transition to those types of roles. And it sounds like that's exactly what this would do, except it would be, instead of them being tech jobs, it would be more energy related jobs.
Yes. Perfect. Green economy type jobs. Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, the workforce is still here. Yeah. People, some did leave. Yes, they followed the jobs elsewhere, but we still have the workforce. We still have the infrastructure. So why not transition, turn those, and then all of a sudden now we have a sustainable, pun intended, a sustainable
I like that.
A sustainable industry that we can move into the future with.
Yeah. And so I'm always curious about the questions, right? There's a lot of questions that we ask in our conversations. And the question that I like to put out is, what does a strong, clean energy economy for Ohio look like? Right? What does that look like? So now our minds are thinking about what that looks like, jobs for environmental justice and just transition communities, because those are the ones right now, those are the communities that are disproportionately impacted more so than others. So that's where the equity piece comes in, right? It's not talking about, give anybody a free ride, anybody being lazy, not working. That's not what this is about. It's about things that have happened in people's lives that were out of their control, no fault of their own, right? Whether it be racism as a public health crisis or a business that left the community, got all the juice out of the community and left. Yeah. And left the good, hardworking people in that community wondering what's going to be next. I say we are they and they are us. It's our collective responsibility to exercise our agency from wherever we touch this conversation to do our part. That keeps apathy away.
Right.
Because you said, why aren't more people supporting it? Why aren't more people supporting it? Apathy.
Yeah. And that's
apathy, or just not knowing. And so that's why, again, I'm just honored to be here with you tonight talking about it. Somebody's listening tonight that will hear this and say, hey, let me go to that website, energyjobsandjustice.org, check it out, get that information, sign up so that you continue to get information. And when those call to actions come, meet us at the State House.
Right.
Let's talk to your legislators. Ask them, why haven't they supported this bill? That's each one of us doing what we can, where we are, with what we have.
Right.
Or as the African proverb says, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion.
All right, then.
We're not trying to take anything from anyone. We're just saying this is good legislation. It's good policy. It benefits all Ohioans. It impacts those who are disproportionately impacted and provides them with the support that they could use. Because I say to people, I said, the folks that we're talking about, they don't need a handout. They're not asking you for a handout. They're just saying, hey, be fair with us.
Right.
Be fair with us. Yeah.
You called out how things disproportionately impact different areas. So we'll kind of like transition a little bit. But before I do that, let me just make sure there aren't any questions, anything like that on Facebook. I don't want to neglect the folks that are listening, because like I said, it's an important conversation. And like you said, can you say the proverb again, please?
Sure. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion.
And so it takes all of us. We're going to need all of us. And even though it might not look like what we are offering, that email that you send to your state rep, or that one time you go to Columbus, even though it may not seem like a lot, when you begin to put those pieces together, all of a sudden you have those strength in numbers, and you look back and you say, wow, the one thing that I did with the thousands of other one things that people did.
There you go.
Done this. So
now it turned into something.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So I'm not seeing anything on Facebook or Twitter, but let's go ahead, and I'd like to talk with you specifically about like BIPOC communities and equity, going back to the equity piece. So just a couple of statistics that I've posted on social media, but I want to say out loud. Across the United States, 1 million African Americans live within a half mile of natural gas, like a natural gas plant or a factory. And same number, 1 million African Americans face a higher than normal cancer rate due to unclean air, highways, factories, landfills, toxic waste facilities. A lot of these are intentionally placed near or in low-income BIPOC communities. And so not even you pass the plant and you don't even realize it, but that has such a huge effect on these communities. Can you share a little bit about that and why equity is so important?
Sure. So I can speak from the perspective of the lived experience that I have, right? And so in that perspective, one thing that I can say is that I have had cancer. And so I don't just talk about these things. When I say, in some of the meetings that I'm in, as I'm presenting or advocating for a cause of one of my clients, what I say is there are people who are literally paying with their life expectancy based on the things you just described, because somebody in this room is feeling uncomfortable. So excuse me if I don't have much pity for your being uncomfortable, when I know that there are people literally, their payment is their life expectancy, and where is their return on investment for choices that were made that impact them that they had no say in, but yet they are paying it full in price. These are the types of things, what you just described, those are the types of things that I say to people, please don't get distracted and caught up in the poverty porn. Right? It feels good. It sounds good. It's like, ooh, that's deep. Oh, did you hear that statistic? It feels good, but it does not incentivize action. Now, we need data to be able to quantify things. So please hear me correctly. However, when we hear it, the next question that I have is, how will you use your agency? Not you literally, but those who are listening to us today or who will be listening to this recording, how are you using your agency to do something about what you just heard? Because it's one thing to hear a thing and feel bad. Or as my dad liked to say, what are those elephants doing with the $16 a month that I see? And do they have a pocket? What are they doing with that $16, right? Or is it really changing? Do you understand how much courage it takes for someone to tell a stranger about the condition that they're living in as a result of the things you just described, only for nothing to change within their lived experience, and for person after person after program after program after organization come to them and do that? So when you ask what does equity have to do with it, it's rooted in history. And that's what we mean when we say, you know, there are things that are no longer serving us. The purpose of a system is to be able to put something inside of it and know with certainty what the outcome would be. It gives us comfort. There's nothing wrong with the system itself. It's the intention of how the system was built. That's where the problem lies. But in our communication, we say, well, the system is just messed up. Yes, the intention of who built the system and how they built it, it was built based on a notion that African-American people who were brought here as enslaved Africans were not human beings. They were 3/5 of a human being. So if someone is not a human being, and that is within the collective psyche of our organization or our country, then I can put that plant next to your home. Right. Because you're not really a person anyway. You know, I'm not really going to articulate that. I'm not really going to say that, but it is a part of my decision-making calculus. And so I say these, and people say, well, that's a long time ago. The 14th Amendment was turned over and it's not there. No, it was, and that did. And people still have laws. I'm looking at the student loan laws that govern our student loans today. 1965 was when those laws were put in place. Now let's just take a quick history check. What was happening in 1965? Racism extraordinary was happening in 1965. And there was a push for people of color to become educated. And so as a last ditch effort, student loan financial things were locked in so tight that even when people say this isn't right and we shouldn't do it this way, because it is law, you can't change it. So you still get millions and millions and millions of people who are suffering at the hands of a law that was made in 1965. The same is the case for these kinds of environmental issues. And so that's why it's important to understand that hands are needed in all of these things. There's people who need to work inside of the system to amend it. There's people who need to work outside of the system to amend it. And there's people who are impacted by the system that impact it. The last example that I'll give is this. It's like a hammer. If I have a hammer, I can use that same exact hammer to build a birdhouse, to build a skyscraper, or to bust out the window in somebody's car. It's the same hammer.
The same tool.
It's the same tool. It is the intent of the hand that holds the tool that determines the outcome. So the system itself, or a system itself, is not a bad thing, because once you get something that works, you want it to continue to work consistently.
Right.
The change is adjusting the intent of what the system's outcome is. Now let the system go.
Right.
And you keep getting that outcome that is to the betterment of all of humanity. Because see, here's the thing about racism. Yeah, there's the privilege, there's the power, but there also the price that comes with that. I love, my daughter used to watch Aladdin. She's called it a lettuce because she was little. and there's one line in there where the genie says, all knowing power, infinity, and little bitty living space, right?
Right.
So that applies in some ways to the racism conversation, or the systems that are built on a foundation of racism thinking, right? Not calling anybody a racist. It's
right.
a foundation of racial determining of who gets and who doesn't. And all of our systems were built on that foundation. So that's baked into everything that we experience,
right.
including the energy sector. But what comes with that power and privilege comes little bitty living space, because I'm always afraid that somebody is going to take what I have. This thing that I've become accustomed to, somebody is going to take it. And when they take it, I won't have it anymore. Now, if you ask me, what is that it that I'm scared of? I'm not sure I can even tell you what it is, but I know I'm so terrified that somebody's going to take it, that I will pass legislation that will make them destroy themselves. You give anybody and everybody a gun, no holds barred, no checks, no nothing. They will destroy themselves.
Right.
And all you got to do is sit back and wait for it the show to end.
Because
but what will never go away is the fear that somebody will be coming after what you have. Because when you are on the pinnacle, everyone is always looking at you. What a sad state to be in, to have it all, the power, the privilege, the prestige, and the fear that someone is always trying to take it.
This might be a vast question, but having had that lived experience, what can we do as a part of these communities, or as somebody that isn't but wants to be an ally? What could or can be done? It doesn't have to be like a foolproof answer, like not looking for a silver bullet, but really just looking like to dig into it, because like you said, you had that lived experience. You have literally lived through it. So what from your experience was done, can be done, can we do?
Yeah, I say each person makes decisions, thousands and thousands of decisions every day. And I say to people, what I'm getting ready to say to you might quite honestly be one of the scariest things that you ever will do, but it'll be one of the most worthy things for you to do. And that is, as you are making your decisions all through the day, look at it with a different lens. Look at it with the lens that everyone that you are engaging with is a human being. One of my favorite poets said, do your work as though you were doing it for your beloved. Right? When you are moving with decisions through that lens, there are things, we've seen people who are straight criminals that are so gentle and loving with their children. If they did everything in their life like they are with their children, it would be a completely different experience and world. And so the thing that I say, and you're right, I couldn't give it to you even if I wanted to try to say a silver bullet and a perfect answer. But here's a hint at where I think the answer may lie, is that if each one of us use our agency to make decisions that are for the betterment, any healthy relationship is to the benefit of yourself and the other person. That moves from a zero-sum mindset of yours is mine and mine is mine. And if you get anything, that means I have lost something, to an abundance mindset, which mimics nature, that wastes nothing and all benefit. And I'm not talking about just hugging trees and letting go of life. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is when we honor the balance of life in all of its forms and all of our relationships, we find that our stress is less. This is why people are walking away and quitting their jobs right now, because see, COVID woke some folks up. It was like, you know what? I was going through these changes. I was living my life by accident, not on purpose, right? I was living, I got to do this. I have to do that. If I don't do this, this is going to happen. If I don't do that, this is going to happen. If I don't do this, right? So living my life by accident, right? I'm afraid if I don't do this, then something's going to happen, right? When COVID hit and we started seeing just how finite this human existence is, we are seeing the biggest exodus from the workforce of people quitting jobs. What are you going to do next? I don't even know what I'm about to do next, but I know this much. I'm getting ready to keep this peace of mind that I just got during this time I've been at home. We're seeing that in such a large scale because people are tapping into what I'm talking about. When we are, and so employers are now having to be forced to say, now, instead of the scarcity mentality, you're my employee and you better do what I said or I'm gonna fire you. Now it has to turn to, how do I honor my employees so that they feel the benefit of being a part of this organization authentically, not just in writing, authentically.
Yeah.
When we get into that place, miraculous things happen, and it mirrors nature. That's what I love about, we are all environmentalists. We may not call ourselves that, but we are. Nothing gets wasted in nature. Even if a tree dies, there are animals and organisms that are designed to break that tree down, to turn it into a substance that other animals can eat or use, or other plants can grow from. And then the cycle continues on and on. When our bodies cease to exist, we decompose back to the earth and then come back again. You know, it becomes a new life. So I think the answer lies in the balance of remembering that we all have a job to do. There is a purpose to our existence. And just like there's a purpose to mine, there's a purpose to yours. Right. And so honoring, I think that the golden rule is treat others like you would be treated. But the platinum rule is treat others how they would like to be treated.
It's
because
interesting.
That's what matters.
You said
treat others like they would like to be treated.
And that's kind of like what the pandemic did for us in a way. And like how you just explained it with employers. Now all of a sudden it's like, we just came out of a pandemic. I was working from home, 5 days a week. So to pull me out of that, it's going to take some work. And so and it's almost like what you said in my head. I'll try to like flesh it out because I'm still processing it and thinking it. But like we are
on the magic carpet, baby. We are doing this thing because all of this is environment. When people talk about environment, the state of my consciousness and my mind is the environment of what I build everything else in my life from. If my mind is filled with confusion, anger, and anxiety, everything I build with these hands will be laced with confusion, anger, anxiety, and fear.
Which is interesting because, for example, we have House Bill 616, which is don't say gay and don't say race, which is the opposite of the mentality we got in COVID, which was, okay, I'm going to look at it from somebody else's perspective. But then we have on the flip side, these bills that are saying, I'm not going to look at it from any perspective. So it's very like contradictory how there's places where we focus so much and we should focus on, like you said, I want to treat somebody how they want to be treated versus I am going to treat them how I think they should be treated. And it's like you said, it's a tool. The golden rule is that hammer. If I have that fear, paranoia, anxiety that somebody's going to take something from it, now all of a sudden I'm looking to shatter glass. But then if I look at it and I'm using like this platinum hammer, now all of a sudden, okay, I'm like, what can we build together? How can I give you the tool?
And it's the same fact. So I'll give you another example. I'm an EV driver, right? I have an electric vehicle. I love it, right? One of the things that fascinates me, and I'm a science nerd, so, bear with me for a second here. One of the things that fascinates me about this EV, which ties to energy, jobs, and justice, which ties to the environment, because reduction of carbon footprint, my individual carbon footprint is part of one of the decisions that I made on that day, right? That's every decision we can choose for the same price. I could have bought a car that put more carbon in the air or less carbon in the air for the same price, right? That was a decision. So on this EV, what I am learning is when I leave, like I went to a meeting the other day, I had 110 miles of charge. I drove 15 miles. When I got to my destination, I had 120 miles of charge. So it's like, hold up. I started with 110. I drove 15 miles. I now have more than what I started with. Why? Because the vehicle that I drive, when I touch the brakes, it charges the battery. It extends the charge on the battery. That is working with the natural laws of electricity and science, because that friction from the brakes happens in every single vehicle. With an electric vehicle, they have simply harnessed that electrical charge to use it to power the vehicle with, versus just letting it dissipate into nothingness to be extracted and consumed. So
wow,
that is how, when I say these natural laws of science and math and universal principles, those things are designed for maximum efficiency. Now, they're not designed for one or another to get maximum profit, which goes back to the zero-sum mindset.
Right.
I am the have and you are the have not. So therefore, y'all can't be having all that efficiency going up in here, because then we're going to be equal. And if we equal,
right,
then how can I look down at you? How can I tell you you're not allowed to be in this space with me?
Because now
so
we're
that's
both
a whole other conversation for another day. We won't go down that pathway. But from a an environmental perspective, and we talk about climate, the decisions that we make, with every decision that we make, like my business cards, they are digital. Why am I doing a digital business card? Reducing my carbon footprint. Okay, SeMia, you talking about this carbon footprint junk. Why should I even care about that? Well, you should care about that because if you imagine, if anybody ever knows what a stocking is, I know my crowds are getting younger and younger, so sometimes people don't know what pantyhose are. Pantyhose are, you know what pantyhose are. If you know what pantyhose are, you know how it look when you see a lady with a run in that pantyhose. It's not pretty. Or if you have that cousin, like we all have had, that has that fat toe, that first toe sticking through that white sock, you know that's not pretty either. And you say to me, what does that do with climate change? Well, it's an analogy, or if you will, a visualization, and that is what we are doing to our ozone layer. That as we produce more and more carbon and we reduce the greenery, the trees, etc. The trees were designed to absorb the carbon and give us oxygen. But in our peopleness, our planes, trains, automobiles, etc., our extractive consumer decision making, we are producing more carbon than the trees and the greenery can absorb.
Okay.
It has to go somewhere. Universal nature and principles. It goes and it erodes the ozone, very much like that hole in that white sock with that toe sticking out, or that run in that stocking. When that happens, you say, so what? Now we got a hole in the ozone, so who cares? Well, what happens at that point is the ozone was there to protect us from the sun's rays. So now we're getting the sun's rays at a hotter rate and faster rate than we would have before. Right. What that does is it heats up our planet. As it heats up our planet, then we start getting effects that would have happened 100 years apart, now happening 3 and 5 years apart. Tornadoes, floods, tsunamis, etc. These things will continue. And if we continue to consume, extract, we will get to a place in the not too distant future. And I'm not trying to scare you, because like one of my favorite movies said, you don't need to understand it for it to be true.
Right. Right. Or believe it.
You don't have to believe it for it to be true. It just is.
Right.
So, we get ourselves to a point where we walk out, we be like Darth Vader. We can't even, we can't breathe because we've consumed so much and destroyed our ozone layer at such a rate that we no longer can live here on this earth. That's why some people are trying to find another planet for us, because they say, look, I know y'all hopeless. Y'all not going to stop. Right. So y'all about to mess this thing up. So we just go somewhere else. However, the plants and those things that move in alignment and balance with natural principles, trees, grass, animals, etc., we can mess around and make ourselves extinct if we want to. They will just grow right on over us, rebalance everything, and continue moving forward. And if you think I'm lying, ask yourself, who planted those weeds in your yard? I know you didn't. I know I didn't, but they show up every year. I put all kind of weed feed and everything else down, and them boys just right back up every year. And so nature will find a way to balance itself and to replenish itself. Our choice is, will we move in alignment with it? And I'm not talking about you got to be a hippie out in the middle of the tree. I'm not someone saying, but will we move in alignment with it to our own betterment? People say, we got to save a tree. I said, look here, tree going to be fine. You better save yourself. Or will we continue on the path that we are? We can continue on the path that we are. But I say each one of us have choices to make every single day. And the choices that we choose to make are those of let me do what I can to reduce my individual carbon footprint. I have control over that.
Right.
And as I do that and other people do that, all of a sudden, masses of people, just like masses of people being extractive and putting more carbon has created this impact. We saw it during COVID. When we weren't driving and all of those things,
the environment was like, woo.
The environment was
like,
thriving, water was clearing up, air
right.
clearing up.
Right.
We got a preview of it. We saw the preview.
Yeah. COVID did a lot of little silver linings in COVID that definitely don't deter from the seriousness of it and all of the deaths that have happened. But there were some things that we can take out of COVID. And it's like you said, it's one small decision. During COVID, it was, I'm going to wear my mask to protect you. Those same decisions, and to protect me, those same decisions happen. It's just, like you said, it's one decision at a time. Every decision that you make, depending, what it is, can either help or harm. And just because, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I won't interrupt.
Just because it's not a black and white. It's like, okay, we can both be halves. This is something that is good for me. And just because I'm doing it doesn't mean it's going to take from you. Just because you're doing it doesn't mean it's going to take from me. So it's almost like having that like selfless decision where it's just one at a time. And then if all of us just do it one at a time, then all of a sudden we have a movement.
Yeah, one of my superpowers is the ability to actually see things. I don't have to necessarily agree with them, but I can see them and I can have empathy for them. And so I was doing this, I was speaking to a group of Fulbright scholars. I was the keynote presenter and I had on some red tinted glasses. And I said, now, if I am looking at my world through these red tinted glasses, it looks very, very different. When I take them off, I see something, I see the same things. Mm-hmm. But my perspective has already been identified that the red tint was the right way it was supposed to look. And so if my upbringing and my lived experience tells me this is the way it's supposed to look, when somebody comes talking to me about this equity jazz, or that it's not about this and that, it's about that and this. No, it's not, because my red tinted glasses told me that this is what it is. So that's why I say each individual person decides and is motivated to change their decisions according to how they are motivated to change their decisions. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We can spend our entire lives trying to make somebody else change their mind, or we can change how we move through things. And as we do that, it inspires others to do the same. You talked about different legislation, and part of the reason that those things are put in place is because people are choosing to do things differently. And when people choose to do things differently too quickly to the comfort of some, then we put laws in place to make it illegal for you to continue that momentum.
Right.
But that's one of the beauties of being in a democratic society. Yeah. Civil disobedience.
We need a little bit more of that in a lot of different arenas. So
and that's those individual decisions, or what we call exercising your agency.
Right.
Right. I think the saying goes, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and then other people wonder, what happened? Right? Yeah. Which one are you? We have all of them.
Honestly, it depends. I think that like your passions, your lived experience will drive you towards certain things. Because there are things I'm like, what happened? Because like, that's just not a thing I was conscious of, I was aware of, that was presented to me. And so again, depending on what color your lenses are, will depend on which category you fall in.
Yeah, and will depend on what you identify as what is true and what is false, mm-hmm. and what is right and what is wrong. And so understanding that we all have different lenses that have been our first lens of choice, maybe choice, maybe not choice. We were just born into it. Mm-hmm. And that identified or that defined what is real or what is not for us. So now we get other exposure and we find out, wait, you mean to tell me there's another way to look at this same exact thing?
There are more colors? What?
Huh? Yeah. So sometimes people, the shell shock of that whole thing, need a moment to kind of get it together.
Right.
But in that thing, if we simply switch from white privilege to Black privilege in an oversimplified conversation, nothing really has changed.
No.
It was just a shell game. It was just a shell game.
Wow. So we've got like a few minutes left. Anything else you want to share, like open it up? Like we've talked about many different things. You touched a little bit on science. I can't say I'm a science nerd, but I am in awe of science. Yes. Like I love museums. I love a science museum because I'm like, I don't know why it works like that, but it does. And it does every single time because that's how science works. And so is there anything that you want to share, elaborate on before I close this out with some next steps or action items? And feel free to expand it beyond like climate and environmental justice.
Sure. So my purpose is climate and environmental justice. I am a granddaughter of the Great Migration, and my grandmother came to Ohio from the Jim Crow South because she said she did not want my lenses to believe that a subservient life is my destiny. Right? I am a daughter of the civil rights movement because I was born in the 60s. So I was born at the time when civil disobedience and transformation of our society was happening. And I'm now a mother of the climate change transformation. So I have had a very rich life. And I ask myself this question, and I will ask your listeners to do the same. If you were to ask yourself right now, if right now, this moment was my last moment, would I be satisfied with how I have lived thus far?
I'm just gonna note that down. I'm gonna pose it to everybody.
The answer is no. That's the place to exercise your agency and perhaps make some different choices. But I strive for that answer to be yes, because guess what? This moment right here is the only one that any of us ever have.
That's it. Once it's gone, it's gone.
This is it. So if COVID did nothing else, it taught each one of us of the fragile nature of our existence. If this was the last moment that you had, are you satisfied? Are you satisfied? That's rhetorical.
That's a deep one.
But I ask myself that. And so in doing that, I'm not in competition with anybody else. I'm not looking externally for anybody else to validate the fact that I am enough because I exist. Right. You are enough because you exist. You have a purpose. And if you can live your life on purpose, it is meaningful, it is powerful, it is transformational, and those distractions will not hold you back, and you will find yourself doing things that you never thought possible, because the very answers that you seek are right there, right there, right there, right there. You can't see them because you're distracted by all the other noise. And they've been there the whole time.
Wow. That's one where you wake up or you go to bed at night. You might not go to bed. If that's the last question you ask before you go to bed, you might not. You might be kept up at night for all the things that you could or should or would be doing. So that's going to be like, I'm going to pin that.
And that's why I say that's some of the hardest work. Right. Because for a person that has gotten on that treadmill of, I've just done so many things, it's too far, I can't get back. I say, yes, you can. You can. You can. Right. And if you cannot sleep, then make some adjustments so that you can.
And it's one decision at a time.
One decision at a time. And one decision can be a leverage point that gets you back. Remember, I told you, y'all can run faster, but we wouldn't know where the shortcuts are.
Please show us. Tell us down this road and everything else.
And that's why, Bria, my dear, we have to work together. Intergenerational leadership is a must.
It has to be.
I honor you as a leader. You honor me as a leader. The way we did it in our tribal way is I had some rice, you had some beans, somebody else had some cornbread. We came together. I gave you rice, you gave me beans, she gave us both cornbread, we gave her what we had. Now all of us have a meal.
Right.
Or for those who are negatively impacted, if I put something in this jar and you want it and you put your hand in there, but when you grab it, you make a fist and now you can't get out of it because you can't let go. Now you caught by a distraction.
We could do this all day.
We could.
And honestly, like come, we this might have to be like a monthly session or something like that.
Call me, girl. You know you have my heart. Call me. I would love to.
There's so much, and all of this, like you said, it applies in other spaces.
Yeah,
it applies in other arenas. It's not just climate and environmental justice, because like you said, everything boils down back to that, and then it's just the foundation of where we can go from there.
It is the place that you are operating from. When the place that you are operating from is at peace, we use the term peace and ease. Mm-hmm. If the place that you're operating from is a place of peace and ease, even though you have strain, stress, all that, those things come to our lives. I told you I had cancer. That wasn't an easy thing.
Right.
But in that thing, let me tell you where my inspiration came from. You're not going to believe it, Bria. This is where my inspiration came from. There's a little fat squirrel in my front yard. I am the breadwinner in my house. My family depends upon me for us to live according to how we live. I had cancer. I had 5 days a week, 7 weeks of radiation, which meant I wasn't working nowhere, no how, doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And as I sat in my window, because that's all I could do, and I looked out the window, I saw this fat little squirrel. It ran down a tree, it ran and did something, came back, and it went back up the tree. And it did that every day. And it was just a chunky and fat. I said, nah, that little joker, he don't have no power, he don't have no privilege, he don't have no networks, he don't have no MBA. He don't know the right people. He just living on purpose. His purpose is to go get wherever you get that nut from, come back, go back up the tree. That's all he doing. And I said, if there is a creator that can make sure that little fat squirrel is taken care of, what makes me think that I cannot get through this?
Right.
And so we went through 7 weeks of cancer radiation therapy, 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm talking to grown folks. I'm telling you real talk here. Yes, some bills got behind. You know, I had to make a decision about my leased vehicle. I said, you know what? I'm not going to be able to pay this. Come and get it. Mm-hmm. They didn't even want to come get it, Bria. I said, come and get it. Now, if I hadn't paid the bill, they would have been like, we coming to get it, right? But I said, you know what? Look, I can't make this. I got to cut back on some things because we got to recover from this. Come and get it. I had to keep calling them, come and get it. They was like, but we don't want to come get it. You keep it. I was like, no, sir. No, you're not. You better come get this thing. Come and get it, sell it, and let me know what I owe you on the other end. And I'll pay cash for the next one. You know what I'm saying? So those are decisions. And I say that because those are real decisions in real time. But in those real decisions, there was still peace. Mm-hmm. I could have been up here terrified, scared. Oh my God, I got cancer. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my car, blah, 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 blah. That would have gotten in the way of my healing. But because I looked at that fat little squirrel and I said, you know what? If he all right, I think I could be all right. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And
now,
guess
did you
what?
name the squirrel out of curiosity?
No, I did not. And guess what? He's still out there. Or she, I don't know. He, she, I don't know. But anyway, he's still out there. She's still out there. They still doing what they do.
Doing it on purpose.
Living on purpose.
So a couple things that everybody that's listening can do on purpose. First of all, you can email, call State Rep Michael O'Brien. Tell him, support support the Energy Jobs and Justice Act. Yes. It is a simple thing that he can do. Yes. Next thing you can do is head over to energyjobsandjustice.org. This is where you will find more information about the bill, more about what's happening. Follow them on Twitter. They're doing a lot. There's actually hearings happening right now. Representative Juanita Brandt was just down there talking amazing things about what it's doing. So follow what she's doing, follow the sponsors of the bill, stay plugged into what's happening, because just as much as we try to stop bills like House Bill 616, we need to make sure that we are propelling bills like House Bill 429. And then obviously it's make sure that you are voting and that you are supporting candidates and legislatures that are going to be pro these things, that are going to be looking out for Ohio to make sure that it's a more equitable and has a more equitable and clean energy future. There's so many things that we can each do. And regardless of how little it seems, though they start to add up, you are basically investing one decision at a time, investing into the future. And then you'll look back at it. If you saved $1 a day every day, at the end of the year, you'd have $360 some. That adds up. Doesn't feel like it right away. You're not missing that dollar.
If they don't like it, Bria, tell them to send their $365 to me. I'll take it.
Listen, split it. BrayBennett.com/donate if you want to go ahead and do that. Speaking of money, but just these little decisions, and I'll end it with giving that question back. If right now was your last moment, would you be satisfied with how you've lived so far? That is not that you didn't say great things, but I took that one. That one was for me. If it was right now, how would you feel in that moment? So thank you, SeMia, for joining us. Like I said, if sorry, everybody, it might just be me and her having a one-on-one, but I'm going to go ahead and keep this wisdom for sure. But thanks everybody for joining. Thank you, SeMia, for joining me, for taking time out of your day to have this discussion, to talk about it. And I look forward to having more in the future.
Absolutely. Peace and ease to you, my dear. Please continue on your purpose and make us all proud.
Absolutely.
Already are. And never forget, you are enough.
That's going to be another one. After that question, you are enough. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining me. If you didn't catch it live, definitely feel free to add comments, ask questions, and